Welcome to the Go Reflect Yourself podcast, bringing you real, practical, brain-based strategies to cultivate a life and business full of freedom and fulfillment, starting from the inside out. Working hard and staying busy will only get you so far. To truly become happy, content, and who we are meant to be, we have to move beyond physical capacities and begin to reflect from within. We have to change our thoughts and our mindset into our most powerful assets, transforming you to take inspired action so you can become a better version of yourself and have the life of your dreams.
You are stronger than you believe. You have greater powers than you know.
Hi there. Welcome to the Go Reflect Yourself podcast. I am your host, Heather J. Crider, and today I have with me Tariq Johnson, a coach that helps people go from employee to entrepreneur. Tariq is a perfect example of being able to create a goal, set your mind to it, continue working to achieve that goal, and break through all the obstacles and barriers that get in your way. I love his story and I love the things that we talk about. We talk about mindset. We talk about law of attraction. We talk about how to create the vision. We talk about his time in the Tony Robbins organization and the things that he learned and the obstacles he had to overcome and what it really takes moving from an employee to an entrepreneur. So with that, I'd like to welcome Tariq. Okay, Tariq Johnson, welcome to the Go Reflect Yourself podcast. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. Looking forward to it. Very excited to continue our conversation.
Me too. I've been looking forward to this for a while since we've had quite a few conversations lately. And I just want to jump right in. We talk a lot, obviously, about mindset. The whole purpose of this podcast is self-reflection and why that's important and things that we can do to better not only our professional but personal lives as well. You've had a journey moving from employee to entrepreneur, and we will talk about that. But I'm just curious if you can take us through a summary of your journey, and then we can kind of pick some pieces in there because it's really fascinating, and I want to make sure that we really highlight that for you.
Yeah, sure. So going back to the initial part of my journey, I started learning about personal development about 15 years ago. I was 18 years old. I'm 33 now. And it was a key point in my life because I was starting to go down the wrong rabbit holes. And so I learned about personal development, got my investment license when I was 19 years old, about a year later, and then continued to get more and more investment licenses. And so I think by the time I was 21 or 22, I had 4 or 5 investment licenses, was working as a financial advisor, doing well financially, wind up leaving that after I bought my house and traveled on the road for Tony Robbins. I was a speaker for Tony Robbins for a year doing corporate training, traveling all over the country, and wind up moving to California after I got married, opened up a few franchise locations, and always had this dream of wanting to be my own boss and wanting to be an entrepreneur and create something on my own. I always had this dream of being on stage and speaking to people and being a New York Times bestselling author, which is still a dream in motion at the moment. But I've had so many different experiences, financial services being the primary one, but having all these little diversions along the way.
That's awesome. We have that in common, as many other things as well. But I also spent a significant amount of my career actually in the financial services. So I'm not surprised that your journeys led you to that path. What was it like being in the Tony Robbins organization, and what did you leave with that personally and professionally?
It was, I think, intense is probably the most accurate way to describe it. It was to this point probably the most mentally challenging role I've ever been in my life. And it started with, I sought out the role. I found out that there was, our team was kind of considered like the Navy SEALs of the company because there was only 6 of us. And we traveled all where Tony's events were going. They would fly all of our belongings out and or ship them out. They'd run us corporate housing, and we would just go into companies and speak and do Tony's trainings, and then we would sell his event. And we'd be out there for 3 to 5 months at a time. So in order for me just to get that role, I had to memorize a 15-page presentation. That was just to apply.
Wow.
So that was challenging. I was working full-time as a financial advisor then, had just bought my first house. And so I'm going through this process, and the company kept rejecting me. They kept telling me no. Part of it was by design because our role, you had to deal with tremendous amounts of rejection. And part of it was just legitimate feedback that they thought that some of the skill sets, I just wasn't the best person for the role. So I was incredibly persistent and determined, and I would not take no for an answer, thinking the whole thing was a test, which is kind of funny because there were times where I'm like, are they testing me and I'm supposed to keep pushing forward? Or are they being truthful? And they're like, no, seriously, man, stay away. So, but I just kept treating it as a test. And actually, as I say that, I think, wow, that'd be interesting if we treated everything in life like that. But it was a very unique role, a lot of traveling, a lot of speaking, a ton of rejection. And at that time, I had really wanted to be a speaker because I wanted to help people. But I didn't realize that world is not nearly as glamorous as it seems, where you could be having impact and having no idea when people aren't giving you that feedback, but it's really connecting with them, and you're dealing with so much rejection on a day-to-day basis. But I'll tell you what, I learned how to speak in front of people. I learned how to present. I learned how to control a room. And I met my wife, which was the best part.
Oh, that absolutely. I was going to say, was it worth it? And you already answered that question. I thank you so much for telling that story and being so candid about it, because I've often heard that going through various people who have had similar experiences. But I heard Darren Hardy actually talk years ago about that he has an automatic rejection built into his process for the same reason, just to push people and to see who the most serious are. And I like how you said that if we would approach everything as if it's a test, just imagine what we could accomplish and push ourselves through. That's an amazing thing. So, I could only imagine we could talk 2 or 3 days just about that experience alone. But thank you for explaining it. Now, what made you leave then? Because from a dream of being a speaker, being able to have that impact, was it because you didn't have that frontline impact? Was that a big part of it?
Yes, it was a combination of 2 things. One, I wound up meeting my wife at one of the big Unleash the Power Within events. I think the first 3 or 4 months I was with the company. And so we were doing the long distance thing for a while because I was traveling all over the country. So part of it was like our relationship was getting more and more serious. And I thought, okay, well, this long-term relationship is kind of challenging. So one was to kind of bring us together, and then 2 was it was just like I kind of did it. It wasn't quite what I thought it was. I had the experience. I kind of was able to check that box, and I felt like it was time for me to move on. It's interesting because sometimes I've learned this and experienced this, and I'm sure the folks listening or watching, however they consume the content. And I'm sure you've experienced this yourself, which is when you have this goal or you have this vision and you put so much energy into attaining it, and then it's not what you thought it was. And so that's so interesting how if we continue to decide to go down that road or if you wind up pivoting. And for me, I was like, all right, check the box. I have the experience, time to move on.
It's so true. And it's okay. Just because that was your vision once and you get there and it's not quite the way you see it, that's okay. It's okay to say, check that box off. I've tried that. It's not exactly what I'm looking for. But what I think a more important point out of that is you were looking at the change of personal fulfillment. Now you have a different part of the equation. You have to look at your life differently. And that's an important piece. And that's real. That's real in this balance. I want to go back for just a second because I think it's really important. You talking about that persistence. So you had the vision, you wanted to work there, even though the rejection wasn't a real test per se. It was a test in so many other ways. Why didn't you give up? Why after, and I don't know how many times, but why not say, maybe this isn't for me. I'll do something different.
Yeah, that's a great question. I just kind of got the chills as you asked that. One, my personality and my style is I'm just incredibly persistent when I really want something. Like if I make up my mind that I want it, I will go through hell or high water to get it. There's just no stopping me whenever I put my mind to it. And so I had decided two things: that I really wanted it. And in my mind, I had also come to the conclusion that this was meant to be, and this was like part of my destiny. So like, I just felt like whatever obstacle came up was just a part of the story that of almost like a script that was already written, because I felt like I had already made up my mind that I was going to make it happen. And there's only been maybe like a handful of times in my life where I really get that persistent, but that's what I felt like about that opportunity. I mean, at the time, I was 21 years old. It was like my dream. I loved Tony Robbins. I was listening to his stuff and applying it in my life. I started advancing in my career and, making a pretty good amount of money at a young age, and just experiencing all this outward success in terms of career and financial, which were my predominant goals at that time. And I just felt like this stuff works and I want to change lives and I want to share this with as many people and work for Tony Robbins. And I just turned on that part of my mindset where it was like, I will not be stopped.
That's awesome. And good for you. And you didn't. So if I could summarize what you just said, you could see yourself in that role. You can vision it to the point where the obstacles were just part of the journey because you had decided and you saw yourself in that role and being that person. That's what pulled you through.
Yeah. Yes to all of that. And I will say that it was not without a lot of hardship, because there was a ton of doubt. There was a ton of, do I want this? Is this really a test? Are they testing me, or is this no? There's just a ton of that. And so there was a lot of conscious visualization, coaching myself through it, pep talks, it's like, someone's like running on the treadmill at the gym and you're just like, that last however many minutes, you're like talking to yourself, like, you can do this. You can do this.
Yes.
I felt like I was doing that for 2 months constantly as I was trying to get the role. I mean, this was a 3 or 4 month process. Memorizing the script, working full time, flying out to California, all sorts of crazy stuff. So yes.
Which is a beautiful bridge and parallel to people wanting to make a jump or a leap into something different, or a dream or a goal. It doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be something that big, but how many times do people set up a dream or an idea and they hit obstacle after obstacle, and then what do? So that's really one of your big platforms, if I can call it that, is from moving to an employee to an entrepreneur. So everything you just described, those same struggles and doubts and fears and frustrations come into play there. So let's talk about the rest of your journey, so to speak, and how you then created that pivot for yourself from employee to entrepreneur.
Yeah. Well, I had many obstacles along the way. Just kind of preface with that. I had many false starts of it not working. When I say it didn't work, I wasn't working. It was who I was showing up as. But let's see. So when I was with Tony Robbins, I'd actually started a clothing line right as I was leaving. So as I left, and then I moved to Philadelphia to be with now my wife, then my girlfriend. I launched a clothing line, and it was called Live with Swag. And the point was to like inspire people to live with like swag, being like live their best life, right? And I had really no interest in clothing specifically, but it was about the mission. So, I went down that path for a long time, and just it never kind of really took off. And actually, it did. I mean, I was grinding and working at it, but it just didn't feel right, and kind of gave up. Wound up going back to financial services. I wound up having a bunch of stops and starts of doing entrepreneurial things, and wind up being back in financial services. And it was always so easy to get back in. I mean, I went back to the same company multiple times. Every time I would go back, it was like I just picked up where I left off. The money was really great. It was always so easy to go back working for someone else. And
so was that your safety net?
Yeah. I think definitely safety net, comfort zone, having that fallback plan. And, I thought for me, I had my investment licenses, and with those investment licenses, it was kind of like job security in a sense. When you have those licenses, you can kind of go anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
So actually, I'm about to let mine lapse later in this year. It's coming up for renewal, and I'm not gonna renew it.
How are you feeling about that?
Feel great. Like now I have so much momentum. I mean, what I've created now, I feel really good, and it's just kind of it's like confirmation by not renewing it. Yeah.
That's awesome. Congratulations. I know it took me several years to let that date elapse. And I had to talk through myself. I had to really get myself prepared. And because, it takes a lot to get those licenses first and foremost. So once they're gone, they're kind of gone.
Yeah. And I think back, excuse me, at the time, let's see, so that was 13 years ago when I got my Series 7. I got my Series 6 14 years ago. Geez, the Series 7, I mean, I was getting paid 8 hours a day. I mean, I had a sweet deal. I was getting paid 8 hours a day to study because I was a part of this special development program. But yeah, I was studying 8 hours a day for 7 weeks to pass that test. There's zero chance I'm taking that test again.
That is exactly what I said. That's why I held on to mine so long, just for that reason of once they're gone, there's a less than zero chance of them returning. So good for you. That's a great accomplishment, and feeling good knowing, because like you said, that's part of your safety net. That's part of that security. It's part of who you are too. This identity that you've had, this part of you. So you've owned, and I think you still do, you were in the franchise business as well. Can you talk to that just a little bit?
Yeah. Yeah, sure. So a lot of my journey in prior to trying to kind of make the leap, and what my vision was, I always wanted to have an internet business and an online brand because I love helping people. I wanted to be in the personal growth space in some capacity. And I knew that I wanted to be an author and be on stage and speak and have a YouTube channel. I was always fascinated about that and thought that that would be really amazing to have a YouTube channel. But with my investment licenses, as you know, and we'll have to dive down that rabbit hole because I didn't even realize you had your investment licenses. So they're very strict about compliance, and there's OBAs, outside business activities. So basically, I was never allowed to do anything out on the internet and in the public talking about one, business, and two, especially not money. So I felt so limited. Like I felt like I just had this, I felt like I was being suffocated in a way or jailed based on what I could do outside of my career. So I decided that, and there were ways I could have got, here's the interesting point to look at. There were ways that I could have been more resourceful. Like I was seeing the limitation as opposed to seeing around the limitation. As an example, so I wanted to have a YouTube channel, right? Well, I could have created an anonymous YouTube channel that wasn't linked to my name, that was totally kind of white labeled to a brand, where I was the voice behind videos and had all sorts of B-roll and could have built it up. And it's interesting because I didn't even think about that at the time. All I thought about was me and me being the face and me being the brand. And it's like, oh, I could have been building that up the whole time. It's just like something that simple, right?
That's a huge point. Instead of leaning into the resourcefulness, you were looking at the obstacle in the way and giving the power to the obstacle.
Yep.
That's a huge point. Thank you for being honest about that. And how many times do we do that? And sometimes never really even see the resourcefulness we could have had.
Yeah, hindsight is always 2020. It's always easier to see it like after it's happened.
Absolutely. Well, so I totally get the limitation feeling though. And, that's really a different conversation for a different day, but you're right. You're kind of in this role of always feeling like you have limitation because you have these steps of rules and things you have to follow and many layers of people to review your stuff. So no wonder you get stuck in that mindset. And that's the pattern. And that's what's an interesting thing about that is the pattern to look at the obstacle, to look at all these layers that you have to go through instead of the creativity and tapping into a different version of yourself.
Yeah, that's why I'm such a fan of personal development and hiring coaches and having just friends that, because sometimes all a coach is just someone who has the outside perspective. They don't necessarily have the answer, but they can just show you that other perspective. And sometimes that's all we need is like, you're just like banging your head on this locked door and someone just like comes up beside you and just like opens the door right next to you because it's unlocked. Or you're running into the door, right? And they just turn the handle. They're like, dude, all you had to do is turn the handle. You're trying to blow yourself through the door.
Exactly.
Yeah, it can be really interesting. So to pick up on the story, so I wind up thinking, I had this thought years ago when I started out in financial services, it would be really cool to own a franchise. I was working at a bank and there was a tropical smoothie cafe across the street, not what I wind up opening. But there was this young guy who owned it. And geez, at that time I was 20 years old. This guy looked like he was not older than 28, 30. He was, I think his full-time job was he worked for a defense contractor. This was when I lived in Northern Virginia. And I just thought, wow, one, how the heck did that young guy do that? And like, how does that work? And that would be really cool to own that one day. Started even looking into that path. I was 20 years old at the time, didn't have much money. And it was like, you've got to have $100,000 liquid, $300,000 net worth. I was like, all right, well, not going to make that happen. Although, I feel like I can keep going on these diversions because, one of the things I tell people now is reach out. Like you never know when you can persuade someone or convince someone. You may not meet the criteria, but they may be so blown away. You come to them with the business plan prepared and say, hey, this is my plan and this is why you should approve me. And you never know when someone will say yes. But anyways, so I wind up, my wife and I decided I thought, what if we opened a franchise and I stayed in financial advising for now and just started building up my plan to build up another stream of income. So at some point down the road, it'll make the transition easier. Because at this point, we were now living in California. I was in my most successful role as a financial advisor at the time. And after I was getting some of the paychecks that I was getting, I was celebrating, but also scared. And it felt bittersweet because it felt like the handcuffs were getting tighter.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought, wow, I'm making as much money in a month as I used to make in a year when I first started out in financial services. That's amazing. But how am I going to leave this? I could sense myself, like it's like fishing, and it was like the hook was sinking in deeper and deeper. And so starting and deciding to open a franchise was really the first step, and got that. Long story short, wound up getting that location profitable in less than 2 months, and wind up owning that location for over 3 years. Actually sold it about 7 months ago after we had our our highest sales month since we had been open. Wow. And now still own a location out here in Florida, which is where I am in my beautiful Airbnb, because we have some challenges going on right now that I came into town for. So it's not always pretty and glamorous.
Nothing ever is. So I want to pick up on something you said, and thank you for sharing that. As your income as an employee got higher, you started feeling more and more of that safety net because it's there. You started feeling more of the noose in some ways, because I really like the analogy of the hook, but would you say, well, let me go back, because I could take this in a couple different ways, but what I really want to know first is, what was the mindset that you had? You've brought this up a couple times of when you were younger, 18, 19, 20, looking at these things.
Younger.
How many? Yeah, exactly. But how many people at those ages say, I want to own a franchise, or I want to own my own business? Why did you think like that then? Was there someone in particular? Was it the money? What was the mindset?
One, I've always been told that I'm an old soul. So, I've just always hung out with people older than me, more successful than me, and just thought differently. Never really got along with people my age at that time. I started reading. I learned about the law of attraction while I was 18, read the book, The Secret, started listening to Wayne Dyer, when I was 18 years old, Bob Proctor. This is what I was listening to when I was 18, 19 years old. Every vacation that I had in financial services at the time, because I was still living with my parents and I was a single guy, was going to personal growth seminars and spiritual retreats. So that was just the life that I was living at that moment. It was just like, I learned about this concept that we can co-create our reality, rewire our brain. And if we, essentially declare a vision for what it is that we want to co-create in our life, that we can make it happen. And I really bought into that. And I was really, really adamant about doing that. I lived in an environment, just a normal middle-class family, where it was constantly like, we can't afford this, we don't have the money. And for whatever reason, I was like that nagging kid that just always asked for everything and was hyper persistent about every single thing. And I just thought, like, one day I'm going to create a life where I can experience whatever it is that I want. Money will not be an option. And I remember thinking, as I was mowing the lawn one time as a 12 or 13-year-old, thinking, one day when I have a family, and if my kid asks for something, if I say no, the answer will never be because we don't have the money. It'll be because of a bigger lesson or whatever it is. And so though that attitude, that mindset, that desire, that motivation drove every decision I made since I was about 18 or 19 years old.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. That's absolutely awesome. So let me ask you this, the co-creating our reality. Do you think there's a lot of people that spend years trying to create their dreams. And for one reason or another, call it an obstacle, call it their own mindset, their belief or limiting belief. Do you think that youth was on your side of naive enough to believe it? And or, so this is a two-part question. And I don't say that disrespectfully that you didn't have struggle. I know you did, and everyone does. But the real question comes into that as life continues to get thrown at us, and as we're in jobs and situations where we're just further in and we don't feel like we have an exit door. There's just no option, an obstacle, and things happen. What do? How do you hang on to that thought that we can co-create our own reality?
That's a great question. I think there's a couple of things. I think there's there's the mindset kind of theory of it, and then there's the tactical side. I think the mindset and the theory is constantly keep yourself inundated with positive, encouraging messages. Constantly be reading books, constantly make sure you have friends or an inner circle that can support you, that lives and breathes this stuff as well. And just keep putting the teachings in your head about how to go out and turn whatever is in your mind into physical reality. You just got to constantly put it in there, right? That's how you're watering the soil and the seed. Then I think the tactical and strategic point of it is no matter, everyone has different obstacles. The obstacle as a 19, 20-year-old being someone who doesn't have financial resources, living with their parents, feeling like I'm too young, who's going to take me seriously? Those obstacles are very real for that individual at their stage in their life. Now, like a lot of the people that I work with are married, have kids. I'm married. We have a kid. That's a whole different obstacle. That's a reality. Like if you're looking to go from, hey, I'm working for someone to I want to create my business and finally be full-time as an entrepreneur or just create a side hustle or something, the reality of you working a full-time job for 40 hours, managing your marriage or your relationship, managing your family life, and creating a business is another obstacle in reality. So the reality is that no matter what someone's situation is, there is a tangible obstacle around their life. But here's the thing, that's no excuse. And there has been someone in your exact situation that has figured out a way to overcome it. So the question is, how do you do that despite those obstacles? And if you don't master it at this stage, the problem will just keep creating and manifesting at different stages. And it's really just your level of thinking and determination of figuring out a way to master the problem, whatever it is, because it's never about the actual problem.
Yep, you're so right. So in dealing with, let's go back to the entrepreneur, the employee to entrepreneur, what advice would you give someone? And you've completely taken that leap now for yourself, right? 100%.
Yes.
And how does that feel to say that?
It feels amazing because this had been my dream for so long. I mean, basically since I was 18 years old, I thought, wow, I want to be, I want to be a successful entrepreneur. However it is that, you define that, and it feels amazing. And it feels really exciting because of who I've become and the fact that I tangibly set out a strategy, a plan, hired a coach, executed like hell that plan and that strategy, and then made it happen. So that's part of what feels exciting, is that every part of it was so intentional and it worked. It worked. It worked. It worked. And
So
so
wait, you mean if you follow the plan, it'll actually work? Is that what you're saying? If you
most of the
listen to
time,
what your coach says.
yeah. And what's cool is that my specific coach is that, I was kind of the one creating the plan and he was kind of holding me accountable and helping with some of the parts. But, I think sometimes it's the plan doesn't work, but it's your willingness to go on a plan B or plan A, or the plan works, but the plan works after a year and a half and you gave up after a year. And sometimes you just got to go through the struggle of the time period. But yes, it works.
That's awesome. Yes, it does. And I think that's a really good point too of timing. I always think about the 3 feet from gold story. Have you heard that?
Yep.
It's amazing. I always think about that just when people are hitting that frustration point of you never know how close you are, but typically that tipping point, when you're that frustrated and you're ready just to give up, you're usually closer than you think. And if you continue to set those intentions and move forward and reset and adjust and all of the things involved, you can actually achieve or something even better that you couldn't see even. So why is it so important for you? Because now your platform really is about inspiring, coaching, helping put systems in place for people to move from employee to entrepreneur. Why is that so important for you?
For me, one, it was a major dream of mine for a long time. So, I felt like my life would not be fulfilled if I didn't pursue that and figure out a way to discipline myself and make it happen. Number two is thinking about, the legacy and message that I want to leave for my son, and, feeling like I can, the whole do as I say, not as I do, or something like that. Like at the end of the day, I could tell him hey, you should be an entrepreneur one day, or it would be really great, or that's the best way to build wealth, or, that's how you're going to create freedom, or you should go after your dreams. I could say it all day, but if I didn't do it myself, there's not an alignment there. And the best gift I felt like I could give him is to live my purpose and my dream. And by me being in that place, that's one of the biggest gifts and teachings that I can give him without saying that. So for me, that was like, I feel like, over the last couple of years, that people talk a lot about having a why. And I thought I had whys before, but for me, there was something about, and actually in the beginning, the first year being a dad didn't even do it. But as I started him to really start to learn and take things in and realize it's not going to get any easier, I don't know, just something switched. And, part of me thinks sometimes it's like that balance between the higher power, whoever everyone believes in, God, universe, whoever it is, but between like the timing and things kind of happening for a reason, and how that coordinates and matches up with your plans.
Mm-hmm.
And it just, I think there was also some just divineness to all of it, not to get too woo-woo, because I'm actually a very analytical and tactical person. But, I think it's important. And the reality is we live with a higher power, and there is a flow to things, and there's a flow to water. I'm looking out the window right now. There's a flow to the way the plants and trees grow. And there's just sometimes a reality of, if you fight the flow, you might make it happen, but you might hurt yourself while you do in the process.
So true. So true. And I love that you said that. What does fulfillment for you look like? Can you define fulfillment?
Ooh, define fulfillment. That's an interesting one. Define fulfillment. I think fulfillment is progress, and feeling like you are on track to living your purpose, and you're realizing your goal. Because I think that at least what I've learned or what I experience is I feel like fulfillment is this ever elusive thing. And just with me being hyper analytical, like I don't know if I'll ever like truly feel fulfilled. And I think it's like the ocean. And it's kind of like I think of fulfillment as a wave coming in and coming out. And there's times where I feel like on purpose and aligned. And there's times where it feels like a grind and I'm just showing up just to check the box that day. And I think you don't have one without the other. Like you can't ride the wave going out unless you're willing to deal with it coming in, because there's not one without the other.
Yep.
Wow, that was interesting.
You just impressed yourself, didn't you? But it's so true. And I really appreciate that that's how you answered that question, because so often people feel like I have to hit this euphoric state to feel like I've arrived. And it never happens like that. And that's where this mismatch of stress and anxiety really stay, because they're looking for something. The bar continues to move. The visions and goals continue to evolve as you evolve. And those are really good things. So I appreciate the visual from the wave, because that's so true. It's the balance. It's the yin and the yang of life. And you can't have one without the other. You can't appreciate one without the other. But fulfillment is your perspective within that, and the appreciation, and then the decisions and choices you make. So I'm in complete agreement with you there. And I really appreciate that. That's awesome.
Yeah. And I think here's an interesting kind of example to add. So like when I set up my plan and said in September of 2020 and hired my coach and go, all right, I'm going to set a goal of 6 months to make the transition. Now, at this time, I'd owned 2 franchises. So like had other incomes and stuff built in. But remember, this plan started 5 years ago, right? So people underestimate the power of actually sitting down and planning out and starting with the end in mind and taking the small steps now, because it builds up and it compounds and it helps you. But my plan was originally to start creating a YouTube channel and posting videos on YouTube. So I decided to niche down into the franchise space because it was less competitive. It was something that I was involved in and knew. But this is not my dream. Like, this is not what I think about in terms of fulfillment, like talking about franchises. I enjoy it. Do I feel like it's my mission and purpose in life? No. But there's the difference and the balance between maybe what decisions you need to make to get yourself to that spot, and thinking of it in steps and phases. And so when I think about, at that time, I was on the executive team for a financial services company, overseeing about half the company. That was my full-time job. So I would wake up at 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, start working on my YouTube channel, planning out content. I'd be recording videos on the weekends. I mean, there was times where I was up until midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning, recording videos, editing, doing things to build up my YouTube channel. And then eventually, driving people on my website and creating coaching and all this different stuff. But there was times where it totally sucked and it was miserable. And I thought, I do not want to make one more video about what questions to ask when buying a franchise, or I feel like I'm tapped out and I've said everything I have to say, or I'm totally exhausted, falling asleep while I'm watching this video. But now I look back, having made the leap, having my business having taken off way quicker than I imagined it could have, now not even having the capacity to take on more clients at this point, like everything is going so well, and one would say I'm lucky or fulfilled, but without that constant grind of everything that I did before and having that discipline, I committed to putting out a certain amount of content, and come hell or high water, I made sure that I got that content out. And it often did not feel fulfilling. So, people get caught up in this trap of feeling like it has to feel good along the way. And it doesn't.
And it most often won't. And to your point, there's moments, and I love how you said that. It just sucks. There's things that you've got to do you don't want to do. But John Assaraf, he tells the story, and I'm sure you know it as well, of one of his mentors that said, are you committed or are you interested? Because depending upon how you answer that question will determine what your actions really are going to be and what you do when it sucks. Are you going to get up and do it again? Or are you going to just say, okay, I'm done?
Yeah. It's super powerful. I love that. Are you committed or you're interested? I'm going to start using that more with myself too, my clients. But yeah, it's a really, really powerful point, because I think so often people feel like they're committed, but they're not. Or it's also okay to not judge yourself. One of the things I used to do is beat myself up because I said I was committed, but my actions were more in alignment with someone who was interested. And so I would get into this pattern of being down on myself. And the reality is there's ebbs and flows, and it is what it is. You just keep getting back up, and every time you fall down, and try not to beat yourself up too much, and just ride the wave when it's there, and when it's coming back in, just don't fight the tide too much, and just time it up well, or just try to keep going and keep your momentum going.
That's huge. And that's where the progress over perfection really comes in. And I appreciate you talking about just giving yourself a break and having a little bit of grace within that. And that's part of the mental circle we get into. If we're not perfect every day, if we're not producing a perfect YouTube video every day, or whatever action you've set yourself up for that you've failed. And that's just not true. And, to your point that you made earlier, as you go in life, the obstacles change. Maybe something happens with a child or a relative, or who knows. There's always going to be something that's going to pull your time and attention. And sometimes that's just okay. It's okay to take a break too. It's okay to go and unplug. There's so many things that's just okay in that process. So I appreciate the way you said that. So right now, your focus, can you just give a summary of how you help people right now make that leap, and how involved you get in providing that structure for them?
Yeah, sure. So, really, I help people go from being an employee to being an entrepreneur. And whether that means that they already have an existing business, that they're just looking to grow and scale. But a lot of the clients that reach out to me are people that are actively looking to buy a business or buy a franchise. Because I talk about that so much on YouTube, I have just an overwhelming amount of people that reach out to me looking for advice and help on that. And so, as an example, a number of the clients that I'm working with now, I'll give a couple of specific examples. One is a couple. They're a couple. They both make 6 figures a year. They have 4 kids ranging from age 1 to ages 16. And they're fed up, and they're completely fed up working for other people and dealing with the corporate politics and the red tape, and not having the freedom and flexibility that they want, or feeling like they're making the income that they really want or deserve. And so I'm actively helping them research businesses to buy, because they are in a financial position where they would at least be able to make the down payment. And so we're doing due diligence on different businesses and looking at existing businesses that have cash flow coming in to buy, because of the fact that they have 4 kids and they've got to make that transition a little bit more seamless. Another client I'm working with, he's young, he's 30 years old, he's an engineer, he's highly analytical, and he's looking to buy a franchise purely more so to build up his kind of investment portfolio and his create multiple sources of income. I have another client that signed a franchise agreement, realized he needed help afterwards in actually starting and growing his franchise, and then he wind up hiring me. And then there wind up being an opportunity to buy an existing location. And so a lot of the clients that I work with are in those situations. But I had another client that came to me who wanted to buy a franchise, but didn't really have the assets to do it. And so, we worked together on a plan of how can you monetize your current skill sets right now? So I work with him to survey his network on what they thought his skill sets were. We got a lot of good feedback. And then we talked about, okay, based on that, what do you think that you could monetize right now? And it turned out it was helping people find their purpose in their career specifically. He's very successful. He makes multiple six figures. And so those are some of the ways, but it's really about helping people plan strategically and tactically about making the leap. And what's fascinating is my journey and thinking back of how I wanted at some point to force my journey from employee to entrepreneur, but how it all aligned perfectly. And now all of my skill set of having worked with, well over 1,000 clients in a financial advising capacity, having that skill set and knowledge, having the business experience of all the different things that I've started up, having spoke for Tony Robbins, having had the franchise experience, the level in which I'm able to guide people, I'm so multifaceted now. It's fascinating to look back and go, wow, I have all these tangible skill sets now that help people and can guide people. And it's not like some of these coaches out there that, God bless them, but they haven't created any results in their life. And they're going out there teaching people how to do things that they haven't yet done themselves. I don't think you have always had to have created the result, but a lot of times it's more helpful if someone has done it themselves and they're guiding you on how to do it.
Absolutely. And your experience clearly has added to the strengths that you have to be able to do that, and not just guide from an accountability perspective, but from a plan, from a strategic way, from what other resources to pull in. That's a huge asset. And what I'm also hearing you say is it doesn't have to be in the franchise space either. It can be just simply, hey, I'm sick of the 9-to-5 grind. Help me make that transition. I don't know what that looks like. I just know that I'm sick of it, and help me figure it out. Is that correct as well?
Yeah, exactly. It's like going into the doctor, right? And going, hey, I feel this way. And with their experience, they're able to go, oh, well, based on you feeling this way, and this is how you want to feel, and doing a quick diagnosis, they're already able to say, okay, it's not this could possibly work for you. So just with, me having done this and the experience that I've had, if someone comes to me and says, okay, I want to leave my job, I'm frustrated. Great. Tell me, what's your overall vision of what it is that you want? Well, I want to make $70,000 a year. I pretty much only want to work Monday through Friday. If I have to work some weekends, that's okay. And blah, blah, blah. I need these certain things too. Okay, great. Tell me about your financial situation. How much money are you making now? Tell me about your assets. What's that like? And based off of that, I'll be able to say, hey, these are some of the options that you have. Sometimes people don't even realize it's actually a lot easier than they think. And there's some really great options that are available to them, but they just don't know what they don't know. Like a lot of people don't know right now that you could go online and find a business that is already cash flowing and making the amount of money that you need to replace your income. And you might be able to use your retirement account or your home equity or something to go in and buy that business. And maybe you're not hands off. Maybe you are buying a job in the sense, but maybe for you, that's what you want. Working 40 or 50 hours a week in your own business is your idea of fulfillment, because it feels so much different when you're grinding for you than when you're grinding for someone else.
That's a huge component. And you put together your summit recently that had various resources within it for people, just different things to think about. And you have a recording, a replay that people can go and get that summit as well. Can you talk to that a little?
Yeah. So I put on what was a really fun event called Employee Entrepreneur, which Heather was on there, and I interviewed her, and she killed it. And so, we had 8 business experts, and it was 6.5 hours of content and interviews with individuals like yourself who, one, have made the leap from going from employee to entrepreneur, talking about their journey from a kind of theoretical perspective, as well as tactically, what did they do, the steps that they took, how did they plan it? We've got people that cover marketing, mindset. We had a small business funding company. And so we are offering the recording for that. It's $47 for 6.5 hours of content. And if someone wanted to grab it, it's at dreamlifemastery.com. I'll tell you, the content's epic. I mean, I think what I wound up saying during the summit was for someone to go through it and use it as their business plan in making their transition. Like, you could go through that content and invest $47 in yourself, sit through it, take a pen and paper, and literally create your business plan or your transition plan just from that. And sometimes I think we get so inundated with content that we undervalue and underappreciate how transformative one idea can truly be if it's one idea that you actually take action and implement. And, that's what's really exciting for me, is that all the ideas that were shared, if someone's truly committed, not interested, they watch that, email me, and I'd be curious to see where you are 2 years from now.
That's a perfect proposal, if you will, or challenge, or however you want to look at it. And I'll agree with you, not just because I was one of the people that you interviewed, but I know how wonderful the rest of the content was as well. 6.5 hours of advice, of ideas, of a roadmap for $47. That's a steal. And it could really spark, you never know what it could spark for you. And that's, just to piggyback off of that point, one idea well executed can change your life forever. And when you're uncertain or you feel stuck, just going through something like that can spark a tiny idea that, if you then put the steps in place, could change your life forever. So we'll absolutely put the link in our show notes. So dreamlifemastery.com is where people can get that recording, and they can obviously also go to your YouTube channel, and then your website. You have a giveaway on your website as well, right?
Yeah. Yep. So on my website, they can get my 7-step blueprint to business profits in 60 days. And my entire thing about the blueprint is really, it's about teaching you how to create any profitable business in 60 days or less in any industry at any time. And when my wife and I opened our first franchise location, we invested over $300,000 to get that location open and got it profitable in less than 2 months. And, I'm sure a lot of people have heard the quotes and phrases that takes 3 years for a business to be profitable and all these different things. And it can be, depends on what type of business you're in. But if your intention and focus is on getting to profitability right away, you can build a profitable business really, really fast. And that guide is all about showing you step by step, tactically, what you can do and how you can do that, whether you have a business already or whether you don't have a business. You can use that guide to do it. It's totally free. It's a 28-page PDF, and it's free. Honestly, my coach keeps telling me that I need to charge people for it and that I should do something that is shorter. But I just feel really excited about it. And I have a lot of people that reach out and they go, I'm on chapter 4 of your blueprint and I'm on this step. And so it's really cool to hear that people are actually going through it and actually implementing it and getting results. So you can grab that for free. And then you can just on YouTube, you can just type in my name, Tariq Johnson, and all of my videos will pop up there.
That's awesome. And thank you for putting that blueprint together. That's a huge gift for people to have. So your mission is clearly in alignment with helping others, and that shows. Is there any last kind of departing pieces of advice other than going and getting your blueprint? I would highly recommend getting that summit replay. Anything else that you would advise someone who's maybe feeling stuck or really does want to take that leap and maybe nervous? I mean, there's so many things that they could be thinking right now, but any parting words you would like to leave with?
Yeah. There's one quote by Tony Robbins that has always stood out, and I wind up talking about with all my clients, which is clarity is power. And the more clear you are, the more your vision and your goals can pull you into them. And a lot of times people are stuck because they aren't clear about what it is that they want specifically, and they don't have it written down. This has been something I've done so many times over the years. So if right now you don't have the vision of the life that you want to live, exactly how much money you want in the bank, exactly what sort of vacations you want to take with your family, what experiences you want to have with your family, what you want your body to look like. If you don't have those things written down in clarity, then you are not going to accidentally live the life of your dreams. I can assure you of that. So I would highly recommend creating a vision for your life in every category, at least just notating bullet point 1 or 2 things that you want. And people tend to go, well, I don't know what I want. Well, start with what you do know. My thing is that there's different shades of black and white. And so you don't have to, you just start with where you are and get clear and then start working towards that. And you'll get more and more clear along the way. But if you're watching this or listening to this and you don't have written down exactly what you want, that is the first step, because then you are going to constantly be spinning your wheels because you're going aimlessly.
That is perfect. I could not have said that better myself. Clarity is power. Thank you for that. That was huge.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you so much for being here today, Tariq. I've gained so much myself, but I just appreciate your candidness, your wisdom at your ripe young age yet. You're still in your early 30s, and I'm way past that mark, so I can certainly say that by now. But thank you so much for just sharing and pouring your wisdom into us today. I very much appreciate your time.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me. It was an honor. Always great to talk to you. We wound up going very deep in the summit as well, and loved hearing about your journey and really enjoyed our conversation.
My pleasure. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Go Reflect Yourself. Please rate and review this episode, and if something moved you, please feel free to share. For more inspired action or to stay in touch, head on over to goreflectyourself.com or heatherjcrider.com. You can also take the growth mindset quiz and learn where your current growth mindset lies. Stay in touch on all social media at Heather J. Crider. Until next time, this is your host, Heather Crider, and I am challenging you to go reflect yourself so you can discover and become who you are meant to be.